It was a cold, dark night in early November when the wake began at the old funeral home in Maplewood, a small town in the heart of the USA. The building was old and creaky, with wooden floors and dim lights that barely lit the long corridors. That night, a large group of family and friends gathered to say their last goodbyes to Mr. John Harper, a kind man who had passed away unexpectedly a week before. The air was heavy and still, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Outside, the wind howled and the trees swayed in a wild dance, their branches scratching against the windows. Inside, the room was filled with soft murmurs and quiet tears. The scent of flowers and fresh earth mixed with the faint odor of old wood. John's body lay in a polished wooden coffin at the center of the room. His face, still calm and peaceful, stared out as if he were sleeping. Around the coffin, chairs were arranged for the mourners. The atmosphere was somber and sad, but there was also an eerie silence that made everyone feel as if they were not alone. Among the mourners were Mary, John's daughter, Bill, his best friend, and several neighbors and relatives. They all whispered kind words and memories about John, trying to ease the pain of loss. But as the night went on, strange things began to happen. At first, it was small. A cold breeze brushed past as people talked. A door that was once closed was found open. Many of the guests felt a chill, but they told themselves it was just the wind. Yet, deep down, they all felt uneasy. Mary sat by the coffin, holding her father's old watch in her trembling hand. She remembered the stories her father had told her about old family secrets and the strange things that sometimes happened in the dead of night. She had always thought they were just old tales, but now, on this dark night, she felt that something was not right. As the clock on the wall slowly ticked away the minutes, the lights flickered. For a moment, the room was plunged into near darkness. In that brief time, a soft sound was heard. It was a whisper, barely audible, coming from the direction of the coffin. Mary's eyes widened, and she clutched her father's watch more tightly. She thought she heard the sound of someone saying, "Help me, please help me." Bill, who was standing a few feet away, also stopped and listened. His heart pounded in his chest. The others, too, seemed to sense that something was wrong, but none dared speak up. The whisper came again, soft but clear, "Help me, please help me." It was as if a voice from beyond the grave was calling out in pain and sorrow. The guests began to exchange worried glances. The pastor, who had come to offer his prayers, stepped forward. "Let us pray," he said in a calm voice, trying to cover the strange sounds. But even as he began his prayer, the whisper grew louder. It seemed to echo around the room, bouncing off the walls and filling every dark corner. Mary felt tears welling in her eyes. She remembered how her father had always been there for her, and now his coffin was alive with a voice that sounded like a cry for help. The voice was not that of her father. It was different, deeper, and full of sorrow. She looked around, and her eyes fell on an old picture hanging on the wall. It was a faded image of a man in old-fashioned clothes. The picture was of a man named Samuel, a name she had heard in family stories. Samuel had been a friend of John's many years ago. Some said he had been a troubled man, haunted by his past. His life had ended in a mysterious way, and his soul was never at rest. Mary's heart raced. Could it be that Samuel's spirit had come to the wake? The thought sent shivers down her spine. The whisper came once more, louder now. "Help me, please help me." It was clear that someone was in pain, and their soul was trying to reach out. Bill, trying to be brave, walked slowly toward the coffin. The room seemed to grow colder with each step he took. As he reached out a trembling hand to touch the side of the coffin, he felt a sudden jolt of freezing air. The hair on his arm stood up. He stepped back, his eyes wide with fear. "Did you feel that?" he asked the others. But no one answered. They were all lost in their own fear and confusion. At that moment, the lights went out completely. The room was swallowed by darkness. The only light came from a few small candles that flickered on the tables. The whispering turned into soft, mournful chanting. It was as if a group of voices were speaking in unison, reciting a long-forgotten prayer. Mary could not tell if the sound was coming from the coffin or from the walls. She felt trapped, and her mind raced with fear. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind burst into the room, extinguishing many of the candles. The darkness deepened, and in the midst of the swirling shadows, a faint figure began to form. It was a man, dressed in clothes that looked old and worn. His face was pale, and his eyes were empty and dark. He moved slowly, as if he were struggling against an unseen force. His lips moved, but no clear words came out, only a low, mournful moan. The guests screamed and backed away. The pastor stumbled, dropping his prayer book, and Mary fell to her knees, her heart pounding in terror. Bill tried to reach for her, but his legs would not obey him. The ghostly figure drifted closer to the coffin. As it neared, the whispering became clear. "Help me, please help me. I am trapped, set me free." The voice was full of despair and endless sorrow. The ghost stopped right beside the coffin and seemed to peer into it. Mary looked up, her eyes locked on the specter. She saw the ghost's face in full detail, a face filled with deep sadness and regret. It was then that she remembered the old stories her father had told her about Samuel. The ghost was Samuel. He had been wronged in life, and his soul had never found peace. He was trapped between the world of the living and the dead, cursed to wander and seek help from those who would listen. Mary slowly rose, her fear replaced by a determination to help. She approached the ghost, her voice shaking as she spoke. "Samuel, what do you want? How can I help you?" The ghost's eyes seemed to flicker with a glimmer of hope as he replied in a voice that was both sad and gentle. "I want you to find the truth of my death. I was betrayed by those I trusted. I was hurt, and I cannot rest until my name is cleared." The room was filled with silence after his words. The ghost slowly faded, leaving behind only a lingering chill. The candles were relit by a mysterious, unseen force, and the lights came back on. But the room was never the same. Everyone felt that something deep and dark had been awakened that night. In the days that followed, Mary became obsessed with finding the truth about Samuel's death. She spent hours in the local library, poring over old records and newspaper clippings. She talked to older townspeople and learned that Samuel had been a man who fought for justice. He had been wrongly accused of a crime he did not commit. His life had been ruined by false testimony, and he died with a heavy heart. No one had ever set the record straight, and his name was tarnished. Mary shared her findings with Bill and the pastor, and together they began to uncover clues that had long been hidden. They found that Samuel had been a friend of John Harper, the man who had died a week before. John had known Samuel in his youth, and he had always spoken kindly of him. But over time, the town had forgotten Samuel, and his story had been lost in the sands of time. One cold, rainy night, Mary returned to the old funeral home where the wake had been held. The building was quiet and empty, save for the lingering memories of that terrifying night. She carried with her a small notebook filled with her research and a determination to give Samuel the justice he deserved. Mary sat in the dim light of a single candle, reading over her notes. The wind outside howled and the trees creaked, and she felt the old building come alive with memories. It was then that she heard it again, a soft whisper, coming from the far end of the room. "Help me, please help me." The words sent a chill down her spine, but Mary knew she could not turn back. She stood up and slowly made her way to the source of the sound. The corridor was dark and narrow. As she walked, she could feel an unseen presence following her. Her heart pounded, but she pressed on. At the end of the corridor, she found a door that she had never seen before. It was old and heavy, with rusted hinges and a lock that looked as if it had not been opened in many years. With trembling hands, Mary pushed the door open. Behind it was a small, dusty room that smelled of decay and old secrets. In the center of the room was an old desk with papers scattered on it. Among the papers, Mary found a faded photograph of Samuel, smiling with hope in his eyes. Next to the photo was a letter written in shaky handwriting. Mary picked up the letter and began to read. "My dear friend, if you are reading this, then I have not found peace in this world. I have been wronged and betrayed. My name has been cast aside like the dust of the road. I beg you, find the truth of what happened to me. Seek out the records. Speak to those who knew me and clear my name. Only then can I rest in peace." Tears filled Mary's eyes as she read the words. The letter was a cry for help from the past, a plea for justice that had been long ignored. Mary knew that she had to act. She took the letter with her, and as she left the room, she could feel the presence of Samuel's spirit guiding her steps. In the weeks that followed, Mary worked with Bill and the pastor to gather more evidence. They talked to old friends and neighbors, and slowly, the dark truth began to emerge. Samuel had been a victim of greed and jealousy. A group of men in the town had conspired against him. They had spread lies and false accusations, and Samuel had been cast out. Even after his death, they had tried to erase his memory from the town's history. One night, as Mary sat at her desk with Bill, going over the old documents, the lights flickered again. The room grew cold, and a familiar whisper filled the air. Thank you for helping me." It was Samuel's voice, soft and clear. Mary felt a warmth spread through her heart, and for a brief moment, she felt that the heavy weight of sorrow was lifting. The ghost had been heard, and his plea had been answered. But not all was well. As Mary and Bill dug deeper, they uncovered a dark secret that sent shivers down their spines. They learned that one of the men who had betrayed Samuel was still alive. His name was Robert, and he was a wealthy man who had built his fortune on the backs of many in the town. Robert had long hidden his past, but now his secret was on the verge of being exposed. Late one stormy night, Mary received a phone call. The line was silent for a few long moments before a deep, cold voice spoke. "Stop digging, Mary. Leave the past alone." The voice was full of malice and threat. Mary's heart raced. She knew that she was in danger, but she also knew that she could not stop now. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. Mary and Bill decided to confront Robert. They met him at his large, old house on the edge of town. The house was dark and cold, and the wind whispered through the empty halls. Robert greeted them with a forced smile, but his eyes were cold and calculating. "Why are you here?" he asked in a curt tone. "We need to talk about Samuel," Mary said, her voice steady despite the fear that churned inside her. Robert's smile faded. "I do not know what you mean," he replied, but his eyes told a different story. As Mary pressed on with her questions, Robert's demeanor changed. His face grew pale, and he began to sweat. "You have no idea what you are doing," he said in a low voice. Mary felt a sudden chill. The lights in the room flickered, and the temperature dropped sharply. A gust of cold wind blew through the room, scattering papers and causing the candle flames to dance wildly. Robert's eyes widened in terror, and he looked behind him as if he saw something that made his blood run cold. In that moment, a dark shadow moved in the corner of the room. It was hard to see at first, but then it became clear. A ghostly figure stood there. The figure was tall and dark, with eyes that shone like burning coals. It moved slowly, and its presence filled the room with a sense of dread. The ghost's mouth opened, and it let out a low, mournful sound that echoed in the silence. Robert fell to his knees, sobbing and begging for mercy. "Please, I am sorry. I never meant to hurt him," he cried. But the ghost was not moved by his words. It moved closer to Robert, its eyes fixed on him. The air was filled with a sense of final judgment. Mary and Bill watched in horror as the ghost reached out a hand toward Robert. In that moment, the past and the present collided. The ghost's form flickered, and for a brief second, Robert's face was replaced by that of Samuel. Then, as if the spirit had taken back control, the ghost vanished, leaving Robert trembling on the floor. Robert could not speak after that night. The people of Maplewood soon learned that he had left town, never to be seen again. His departure was silent and mysterious, as if he had been erased from the memories of those who once knew him. In the weeks and months that followed, Mary continued her work to clear Samuel's name. With the help of Bill, the pastor, and several brave townspeople, she restored Samuel's honor. A small memorial was built in the town square, where his story was told for all to hear. The ghost of Samuel was seen no more after that, as if his spirit had finally found peace. But on dark nights, some say you can still hear a soft whisper on the wind. Thank you for setting me free." The old funeral home in Maplewood became a place of legend. People spoke of that one haunted night when the dead reached out to the living. They remembered the cold wind, the flickering candles, and the ghostly voices that called out for help. Many tried to forget, but the memory of that night was burned into the hearts of those who were there. Mary often thought back on that night. It was a night of great fear, but it was also a night of courage and truth. She had faced the unknown and had brought light to a dark secret that had haunted her town for many years. The ghost of Samuel had shown her that even in death, a wronged soul can find justice when someone is brave enough to listen. Now, every year on the anniversary of that night, the people of Maplewood hold a small ceremony at the old funeral home. They light a single white candle and stand in silence. It is a time to remember those who have passed and to honor the truth that set a troubled soul free. They call it the Night of Remembrance, a night when the veil between the living and the dead is thin, and the voices of the past are heard once more. Even now, in the quiet hours of the night, when the wind is high and the shadows dance in the dark, some say that the spirit of Samuel still walks the halls of the old funeral home. He is seen in a faint, white glow, a silent guardian of the truth. His eyes, though filled with sorrow, shine with a deep gratitude for the justice that was finally served. And so, the story of the haunted wake and the ghostly plea for help lives on in Maplewood. It is a story of loss and betrayal, of fear and courage. It is a tale that reminds us that the past is never truly gone, and that sometimes the dead come back to right the wrongs of the living. For those who are brave enough to listen, the voices of the past have much to tell. As the years pass and new generations grow up in Maplewood, the legend of Samuel and the haunted wake is told and retold. Parents warn their children of the old funeral home, and the brave few venture there on dark nights to pay their respects. The truth, once hidden in shadows, now stands clear as day, a reminder that every soul, even one lost in darkness, deserves the chance for peace and redemption. In the end, the wake at the old funeral home was more than a final goodbye for John Harper. It was the night that a restless spirit found a voice, and a town was forced to confront the dark secrets of its past. It was a night when the dead reached out and the living listened. And it is a night that will never be forgotten, a night of fear, sorrow, and finally, of healing. The old funeral home stands silent now, a relic of a time when the boundary between life and death was all too real. It is a place where the echoes of that fateful night still linger, where the memory of Samuel's sorrow can be felt in every cold breeze. And on quiet, dark nights, when the wind whispers through the trees, those who listen closely may still hear his voice, a soft, desperate plea that says, thank you for setting me free." This is the story of the haunted wake. It is a story that lives in the hearts of those who were there and in the memories of the town of Maplewood. A story of ghostly whispers, of hidden truths, and of the eternal quest for justice. A story that will remind us all that sometimes, even in death, our voices can change the world.